So there are reports out now about Joe Biden having Larry Summers as his top economic advisor and somebody who he is looking to craft economic policies to deal with the economic depression that has resulted from the coronavirus. There's so much to say about this. This is such a telling story about the corporate Democrats. One of my favorite documentaries ever is Inside Job, which is a documentary that explains what caused the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and the response by the government to that crisis. And the film does a great job of showing that for decades, there was bipartisan consensus on deregulation of financial institutions. Both parties, again, in service of their corporate donors, came together after the crash and economic crisis to bail out the people responsible for the crisis with trillions of dollars, no strings attached, and absolutely no consequences for their behavior that caused the crisis. And probably better than any film I've ever seen in my life. They did a great job of exposing the architects and instrumental figures in crafting those neoliberal corporatist policies that serve the interest of financial institutions and big business at the expense of the working class people in this country. And one of those chief architects was Larry Summers. Larry Summers is the poster child of the revolving door and corruption. He goes into the Clinton administration as Deputy Treasury Secretary, already has ties to Wall Street and financial institutions. And in that position, he deregulates the industry, which lead to the crash in 2008. And then after he leaves the Clinton administration, he goes on to become the president of Harvard. At the same time, he's sitting on boards of financial institutions and he's getting paid millions of dollars to do speeches to Wall Street banks. Clearly a favor for the wonderful job he did as Deputy Treasury Secretary at deregulating those industries and making them billions of dollars in profit. So, and it's more nefarious than that, because as he's getting all these millions of dollars from these financial institutions, he's a president of Harvard and this revered economist, and he uses that position to provide cover for even more neoliberal economic policies that benefit financial institutions. So anytime the banks want more deregulation and they want their puppets in Washington to do that deregulation for them, they just go to Larry Summers and say, hey, come up with this study that says we need to get rid of Glass-Steagall and we need to further deregulate the industry and make it sound really smart. So he did it, and he provided the rationalizations for a lot of the deregulation that the Bush administration pursued, which also contributed to the financial crash that happened in 2008. If that wasn't enough, here comes the Obama administration after their just ran a campaign in 2008 where their biggest contributor was the financial institutions, specifically Citigroup. And they come in to deal with the financial crisis. And Obama hires Larry Summers to be his top economic advisor. Now Larry Summers is back in government at one of the most powerful positions in government to craft policies to deal with a crisis that he was instrumental in creating. And in that position, Larry Summers finds some way to justify bailing out the people who caused the financial crisis of 2008 with trillions of dollars, no strings attached. And in some cases, the executives that bankrupted their own company through their own fault and bad decision making and corruption and greed, those very same executives got millions of dollars in bonuses and were never prosecuted. Furthermore, to add insult to injury, even though the crisis created by Larry Summers And these very same financial institutions have led to millions of people, 5 million families, to be evicted from their homes. Larry Summers comes out vociferously arguing against doing anything to help the millions of people who lost their jobs and who lost their houses as a result of the financial crisis. So throughout his career, no matter what title his Larry Summers has, he has shown that his number one job, his top priority, is to be the bag man for financial institutions and big business and let them loot the treasury, let them rob the working class in this country, and do everything that he can to help them run out the back door with all the money. That's who Larry Summers is. So it is unfathomable that in the middle of an economic depression, Joe Biden is not only seeking the economic advice from somebody like Larry Summers, he has him crafting the policies that Joe Biden will be implementing if he was ever to become president. And it's amazing because the response to the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus has, from both parties, has been completely one-sided in favor of corporations and Wall Street. They're already getting everything they possibly can out of this situation. They've already secured multiple trillions of dollars in no strings attached bailouts. As if that wasn't enough, both the Republicans and Democrats have allowed big business to set the terms for exactly when and how we reopen the economy, with almost no input from, actually, literally no input from the workers. And even after they did everything in their power to block and means test direct cash payments to people in this country, ultimately getting Congress to only agree to a one-time $1,200 direct cash payment to certain people who qualify for it. Then we find out that there's loopholes in that which allows your banks and debt collectors to get access to that stimulus money before you do to pay off any existing debts or overdrafts that you might have. So even the crumbs that they gave to regular working people still benefited the large corporations and financial institutions. And that's not enough. And that still isn't enough. The Democrats aren't willing to come out and say, okay, we already gave everything in the kitchen sink to corporations. Let's at least pretend to do something to work on behalf of the American people. No, Joe Biden is now coming out saying, yeah, I'm going to allow, if it's me, president, I'm going to allow Larry Summers to come in and craft the economic policies to gear it even more towards the corporations and financial institutions in this country at the expense of everybody else. Joe Biden could have picked anybody in the world to craft economic policies to combat this depression that's resulted from the coronavirus. And he picks Larry Summers. Larry Summers, who the very last time there was an economic crisis in this country, found some way, an economic crisis of his own doing, found some way to bail out the people who were responsible for it and give them $1 million bonuses, and at the same time screw over the people who were the victims of their fraud and their neoliberal economic policies. Completely screwed them over, left them high and dry, and left complete economic devastation in his wake. Those millions of people who lost their jobs and their houses as a result of the economic crisis, what do you think happened to them afterwards in this so-called recovery under the Obama administration? They didn't get those jobs back. They didn't get those benefits back. Instead, a lot of those people ended up working low-wage retail jobs or customer service jobs with no benefits, no pay, and limited hours. 70% of the country was living paycheck to paycheck the last time Larry Summers implemented a response to the economic crisis. 75% of the country couldn't afford a $500 emergency the last time Larry Summers crafted a response to an economic crisis. And now, in the middle of a depression, Joe Biden is promising that he's going to allow the very same man to come in and craft even more one-sided economic policies that screw over the working class in this country. And it is some of the most brazen corruption and disregard for just optics that you could imagine. It's incredible. The Democrats are shameless.